Welcome, everybody. Can you hear me okay? All right, great. Well, a very special welcome from me. Not only is this our first conference, but I'm a local Phoenician, so it's just great to have everybody here in town. Really appreciate you all traveling in. And also really appreciate the fact that they decided to do this before we hit 110 degrees. So I think we're all thankful for that at this point. But I'm Meghan Holmes. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Advyzon Investment Management. I'm joined here today with the founder of Integrated Compliance Advisors, Stacie Craddock, and the CEO of Synergy RIA Compliance Solutions, Scott Gill.
Thank you.
Our discussion today will really be around those gray areas of compliance, those items that our panelists, the compliance experts, are hearing on a regular basis from advisory firms that are working with them. Hopefully, we will have enough time at the end of our discussion to open it up to questions from all of you too, and topics that you'd like to spend some time on. So, with that being said, I'd like to give them and give the audience an opportunity to learn a little bit more about our panelists. So, Stacie, you want to kick off introductions?
Absolutely, thank you. My name is Stacie Craddock. I am the founder of Integrated Compliance Advisors. We do consulting for SEC RIAs and some state firms as well. I've been in the financial industry, for 30 plus years. Sat in every position from receptionist to wealth advisor, clear up to compliance and C-suite executives. With that, it gave us a great, unique insight to both sides of the industry. So as consultants, we try to keep it real and relatable for you. We know you wear many hats in your firms, and we just kind of want to bring it down to the basics and tell you what's important and what you have to watch out for. So thank you for the opportunity.
Wonderful, thanks for joining us. And Scott?
Hello, folks. I'm Scott Gill, founder and CEO of Synergy RIA Compliance Solutions. Thank you so much for coming today. Got about 17 years in the business. Started in 2006. I was a phone broker with E-Trade Financial. Got my 763 a few years back. Won't go through the entire bio, but we focus on providing compliance solutions for small to mid-sized registered investment advisors. We focus on a real proactive approach. We like to really have a relationship management-based approach to our compliance. We like to sit on the same side of the table, the advisors that we work with. Let folks know that we're on your side and that we try to make sure that we're able to adopt regulatory interpretations to allow you to operate the way that you want to operate. And so hopefully today we'll talk a little bit about some tips and tricks, get you going in the right direction.
Wonderful. Well, let's get straight into audits. Let's jump right in.
Yeah.
So as far as the recent audits that you guys have gone through with your clients, interested in hearing from you what you're seeing as the biggest challenges that the advisors are facing. Scott, I'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we see the biggest challenge primarily, receiving that initial document request list. Right, and fulfilling that document request list in a way that, provides the information to the regulators promptly, while at the same time not over-disclosing or providing too much information, right? And so you've got a lot of things going on, right? You get that letter, you get that phone call, you get notified you're under examination, right? So you already have that almost emotional reaction to that. Well, on top of that, you're about to get a really long list of stuff. Okay, and this is why we love data aggregation. We love data aggregation because your ability to be able to put together that initial document request list is the first opportunity you have to show the regulators that your books and records are readily accessible, right? And so a couple of pieces that we see folks struggle with is the client list, right? And so they want a list of your clients, they want to know the account number, sometimes they may want to know the date of inception, they want to know the account type. It's a really long Excel file of all of your client data. Okay, being able to to have that data readily accessible is critical to getting the examination off on the right foot. And the other piece that we see folks struggle with is a securities list or a portfolio holdings list. And so they may ask you, show us all of the securities as of, the 30th of April, right, of a particular date. Okay, and they may want to see CUSIP numbers, right, or they want to see the type of security. Right? They want to know the cost basis in some instances, and that's very difficult because a lot of custodians aren't able to provide you cost basis in 7 to 10 days, right, in the way that you want. And so I think that that's probably the biggest piece of the puzzle that we see is compiling the data and then the general understanding of the terms and concepts. And so they may ask you for, a list of your principal transactions. And if you're not a full-time compliance officer, you don't read compliance materials on the weekend, then you may not know about principal and agency transactions, or you may not know what constitutes being a related person as it pertains to an advisory relationship. And they may want to ask, are you a related person on that advisory relationship, right? And so not understanding the terms and concepts on the pieces from the document request list creates an immediate hurdle, right, to your ability to be able to fulfill that list. And so that's kind of, the biggest challenges that we see.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And what about you, Stacie?
Yeah, I think on our side of the business, we see a lot of what Scott's speaking about as far as documenting those objectives. Your CRM or your Advyzon is only going to kick out the information that you put into it. So making sure that those objectives are documented within the system. So when you do that export, you don't have a lot of gaps to fill. Are you doing SLOAs? Are you documenting those objectives? Are you marking down your annual client reviews? Because in exams now, we're being asked, how do you do your annual client reviews and how do you document that? The ADV brochure delivery, are you documenting when you're delivering that? So we're seeing that come up in the secondary round of exams after that initial request. And then in addition to that, mutual fund share class. Are you getting those inter-class exchange reports from your custodian and looking at those Class A shares? The SEC deems that, you should always be in an institutional share class. We don't necessarily feel that way as long as you can document why that share class is best for that client in particular. And then the last thing on that, which I don't know if you're seeing a lot, is just questioning on the DOL PTE, the rollover analysis. Are you documenting what your reason is for the rollovers or the IRA to IRA transfers? Because while we're not seeing it specifically right now, we have had a couple exams asking how clients are documenting that. Are you showing a comparison on fees and services, or are you just providing education? So.
Great. So I think you've kind of hit along the lines, but as we're thinking about the 2024 exam priorities and things that firms can really be doing proactively, and you're having discussions with advisors, where are you finding that they're having a lack of clarity around what they need to be doing to be compliant?
I think disclosure of conflicts of interest is one that a lot of advisors struggle with, and it's kind of interesting why I think that is. I think a lot of advisors operate under the assumption of innocence. That's what I call it, right? Like, I know I'm not doing anything wrong, right? And that in itself is really great, and we always have faith that advisors are indeed doing the right thing. But the issue with that, right, is that when you have that kind of train of thought that you're not doing anything wrong, well, that's a barrier to you actually identifying conflicts of interest. And so in the commentary surrounding the SEC examination priorities, there's this concept of economic incentive, right? And so the real question is, right, do you have an economic incentive to make a recommendation to a client that may not be in their best interest? The question is not whether or not you make recommendations to clients that are not in their best interest. The question is, could you, right? So do you have any relationships, any affiliations, other industry affiliations, compensatory arrangements with other professionals in which you could potentially use those relationships in order to make a recommendation based on, putting more money in your pocket as opposed to what's in your client's best interest. And so just broadening that kind of train of thought as you're going through your conflict of interest evaluation and disclosures is one of those hurdles.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
Yep.
Stacie, what are you seeing?
Where we get a lot of questions is the new marketing rule, right? And I feel like we've kind of beat that to death in all these compliance sessions. But in addition to that, Google reviews. Are you entangling yourself in Google reviews? Are you soliciting to them? Are you cherry picking what clients you're soliciting those for? Because if you are, that's another conflict of interest. You have to make it equal for all of your clients, and you have to put it out there for all your clients to leave reviews. And once you do that, once you ask or you solicit those Google reviews, then you have to adopt policies and procedures and add disclosures. So there's just a lack of clarity from the SEC on what those guidelines are. So just making sure that you have those disclosures added. And then another confusing, and I don't think there's a whole lot of guidance on it from the SEC, is artificial intelligence. How are you using that within your firm now? Are you using it for recommendations? I mean, The SEC's been pretty clear that that's not okay. But if you use them for advertising, just for inspiration, are you going back through and reading it and adding your own voice to it? So just this morning on Regulatory Compliance Watch, they said AI is the new emerging risk for this year. So, and if you use AI, then have you adopted policies and procedures with it?
Yeah, and that's a really great point. I do want to piggyback on that because we always tell folks, from our perspective right now, it's reasonable to assume that regulators will take any output that comes from an AI tool as if, right, it is adopted holistically by the advisor that leverages it. In other words, if you put a prompt in ChatGPT, whatever comes out, if you publish it, it's yours, right? And so there won't be an opportunity from our perspective for advisors to say, well, we didn't mean that. That's just what the AI said, right? And so we definitely encourage CCOs to do one final review of anything that constitutes an output from an artificial intelligence tool before disseminating that to the public.
Yeah. And the cautionary thing around that, I don't know if you've seen in ChatGPT, when you put anything in for the Advisors Act, it'll tell you that it predates 2022. So it's not even up to date on IRA rollover rules or new marketing rules, that kind of thing. So you just have to be very careful in it.
Yeah. So changing directions a little bit, if we think about the life cycle of an advisory firm, and a lot of firms here looking to grow their business, right? We think of different milestones within that business. Scott, I know you have a lot of discussions with advisors about transitioning from state to SEC registration, and Stacie, those discussions with advisors when they're adding additional IARs to their business and the compliance considerations around those two milestones within their business. Can you hit upon what advisors should be thinking about leading into those two different milestones?
Absolutely. So state to SEC transitions. The first thing is make sure that you have a registration basis, right? So one of the first things that they'll ask for in your new registrant exam is your registration basis. Okay, and what they're looking to see is that you are indeed eligible to be registered with the SEC. Okay, and we know that some states can be difficult to work with. Trust me, I know. But at the end of the day, your state being difficult to work with is not a valid registration basis to be with the SEC. And being an internet advisor, which is also one of the popular workarounds, there are some intricacies on that as well. So we don't want to do that. All right, but maintaining a valid registration basis, reviewing your written supervisory procedures. Okay, very few, to be honest, state-regulated advisors have state-specific regulatory language in their written supervisory procedures. It takes a lot of time to comb through websites to find state regulations. But if you do, right, what you're preparing to do is you're preparing to replace those state regulatory guidelines with SEC regulatory guidelines, which are easier to find. So reviewing those written supervisory procedures, going back through your client count, ensuring that you have the accurate count for the number of clients that you have in each jurisdiction as you prepare for your notice filing at the SEC level is another piece that we advise. And then, of course, reviewing your task lineup. Okay, so hopefully everyone has a system of tasks that you're executing on a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis. Okay, there may be some additional tasks, okay, that you will need to add as a part of becoming an SEC regulated advisor, and there may be some tasks that you might need to remove. For instance, if your state has a net capital requirement, you have to submit financials every year. Okay, you're not going to have to do that anymore once you get to the SEC level. So really just looking at your WSP, your written supervisory procedures, and making sure that your task lineup, the tasks that you're going to do on an ongoing basis, correspond with the changes that you're making from state to SEC registration.
Great. And Stacie, when they get to the point of adding additional advisors to the business, what do they need to be thinking about?
My number one cautionary tale is review the disciplinary history. If you onboard advisors with disciplinary history, you are inviting in the regulators. They follow where that disciplinary people who have been, let go, terminated, you fired from other firms, they follow that. And if you're onboarding 3 advisors with disciplinary history, chances are you're going to see the SEC or your state regulator. In addition to that, review the book. Make sure that the products that they have written or recommended is in line with the products your firm recommends, so you fully understand it. And as CCOs, you need to understand those products to supervise it. And then lastly, I think get attestations so you can review their social media sites to make sure that they align with your values of the firm, both we've seen a lot with political or religious postings that don't necessarily associate with the firm, but reflects on the firm. So we just want to be careful about that. Get those attestations on outside business activities, social media, political, all of that.
Great insights. So I know this is a tough one, and it's hard to narrow it down to one item, but you're getting one item. If just given the amount of time, resources, change in regulation, in businesses as they're growing, and everything that everybody needs to be thinking about from a compliance perspective, what is the one most important thing that advisory firms need to be making a top priority to make sure that they are ensuring that they're in good standing?
We always tell firms, if you only do one task every year, it's your annual compliance review. Okay? If you do your annual compliance review effectively enough, okay, then you will be able to identify areas of risk and potentially minimize the impact of those areas of risk on your firm's compliance program. Okay? And the way that we like to do that is by using the risk matrix. Okay? And so ultimately with the risk matrix, what we're doing is we're listing every category of risk that could potentially impact our firm. All right? And what we're doing is we're going to go through and we're going to look at each category of risk, and we're just going to do some quick commentary regarding how we're currently dealing with that category of risk. All right. Now, this does really, really great things over time, because over time you're going to start to find that there are certain areas of compliance that you don't need to pay much attention to. Now, you still have to look at them, but you don't have to pay. If you don't use solicitors, then all you're doing every year is just reasserting that you still don't use solicitors. If you don't use sub-advisors, you don't need to spend hours and hours on sub-advisory due diligence. You just don't use sub-advisors. But by listing that category of compliance in your risk matrix, you're showing the regulators that you are aware of those categories of compliance. And then taking those categories, those areas of risk, identifying the ones that are most likely to impact your firm's compliance program, and then documenting the steps that you're going to take to remediate those items. Okay? And if you spend a couple of hours doing that and summarizing that in one final annual compliance review report, okay, and the reason that we suggest summarizing it is because you don't want to give the regulators more than you have to. All right, if they ask for your annual compliance review, you need to have a summary document that you hand to them that says, here's our annual compliance review, as opposed to giving them details of every task you did throughout the year. Okay, if you do that effectively year over year, you will find that you not only learn more about the categories of compliance that impact your firm, you'll be more prepared when you get ready to onboard investment advisors because you'll know what questions to ask. You'll go through your documents on an ongoing basis to keep them fresh and up to date, and you'll have a good grip, or feeling at least, that you're doing the best you can with your firm's compliance program. From our perspective, one of the worst things that can happen outside of regulatory enforcement is to get a failure to supervise. And that's when the regulators come in and say, hey, you're not doing anything, right? And we don't even have faith in your ability to be able to run a firm compliance program. And we have seen single advisor firms find themselves in really difficult situations when they get a failure to supervise. Okay? And so by doing a comprehensive annual compliance review, if nothing else, you can show the regulators, hey, listen, we're trying. We're moving in the right direction. Okay? There is no 100% way that you can guarantee you're not going to get a regulatory deficiency in an examination. You can have two different examiners look at the same case and make two completely different determinations. And so it is that unpredictable. However, what you can do is be prepared to provide documentation to show the regulators that you have indeed been taking every step that you possibly can to mitigate risk for your firm's compliance program, and that's through the annual compliance review.
And I know you agree with
I
the
do
risk
agree.
assessment,
Yes.
but you can't pick that one.
No,
So-
we argued who would go first over that one.
Oh, sorry. Did I drag that one? Exactly.
So Stacie, what's your number two?
No, you are totally fine to take that one. I agree with you 100% that evaluating all that risk is probably the number one priority. Second to that, know your tech stack. If you have limited time and resources, if you know Advyzon and you go to the blue reports at the top and you're doing testing on concentration, you're reviewing your securities, you're reviewing client portfolios, you're documenting those objectives. If you know Advyzon and you're going through that and you have a task list that tells you when to do that testing, you're going to be solid. Do compliance to a reasonable basis.
Wonderful. So one last question. And it's a tough one that I know you get questions from advisors on a regular basis. And it's, how do advisors know when they've done enough? Stacie, you want to take this one? I'm letting you.
Okay, well, I'm glad you're following me up on this one because I don't know, you don't know when you're going to do enough. It's so subjective to the regulators you're getting in your region. But are you doing it to a reasonable basis? Are you running testing? Are you supervising? Are you looking at all your social media? A level of supervision over the entire firm. So that's what I think. You have to be able to show that you're supervising.
Yeah, and I kind of like to look at it from the perspective of an advisor, right? When you're preparing for a client meeting, how do you know when you've done enough for your client meeting, right? It's when you can answer the client's questions, okay? And so at the end of the day, how do you know when you've done enough compliance? Is when you can answer the regulators' questions, all right? And at the end of the day, that still doesn't mean you've done enough, but what it means is that you will be able to have a conversation with the regulator that shows a high level of competence, right? In terms of either restoring or providing them with the faith that they need that you're able to run a firm compliance program, okay? And you're able to show that you are aware of categories of compliance to the extent that you are able to hold conversations about how those categories of compliance connect to your firm's compliance operations. Right. So the worst feeling in the world is when you're on a regulatory examination call and the examiner asks you a question and you have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. You don't understand the concept that they're getting to. You don't know what they're trying to find out. You don't know what your firm's compliance program documents might say about that category of compliance. And that's the worst feeling in the world. And so from my perspective, although there is no 100% solution, knowing that you've done enough is when you feel like you're able to confidently hold that conversation with the regulator, just as you would with one of your clients as they have questions about their investment management or financial planning profile.
Yeah. And I think in addition to that, if you are asking yourself if you're doing enough, take your compliance manual, go through it 20 pages at a time and see what it says that you should be doing. That is your Bible of your operations. Always refer back to that because they're going to hold you to whatever's in that written policies and procedures.
And a quick tip and trick for everybody, if you go through your written supervisory procedures manual and you just search for frequencies, if it says you do something quarterly, if it says you do something monthly, if it says annually, pay close attention to those because those are the gotchas, okay? So if you don't have a lot of time to go through your written supervisory procedures, go through Control F quarterly, Control F monthly. I'm serious, Control F annually.
Yeah.
And ask yourself, am I doing it at this frequency? And then of course, if you can't do it at that frequency, right, then you can consult with one of us. We'll tell you whether or not it has to be done at that frequency. If 9 times out of 10, okay, regulators are not gonna tell you at what frequency things need to be done. What they're going to tell you is that your policies and procedures need to be reasonably designed to detect and prevent violations. And reasonably is very broad, so you've got some wiggle room there. Just try not to catch yourself up on the frequencies.
Okay. And do I have time for one more?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And percentages, right? If it says you're reviewing 10% of your emails, review 10% of your emails. I was involved in an arbitration case where they didn't, and it was a $35,000 fine. They had reviewed 8% of the emails. So look for those percentages or those absolute numbers and make sure you're doing it.
Good points. So I could keep asking questions all day long, but I'm going to open it up to the audience. I think we have a mic that will come around.
So I just have a
And we might not.
question related to policies and procedures and compliance manual. We're a dual hybrid, but we're going to be dropping our broker-dealer affiliation. At this point, we're required to follow their compliance manual. The states that we are registered in do not have a compliance manual requirement. However, it seems like it's something we should have. Where do you start with that? Do we just kind of grab our broker-dealers and modify it? How extensive does it need to be? What advice would you give us as we're in that position of leaving the PE board?
Do you want to take that one, Scott?
Yeah, so there's quite a few options you have. All right. You may want to start with, and obviously I'm going to tell you, give me a call. Let's sit down and look at it. All right, that's the first option. No, but yes, most all compliance consultants will have templates, okay, that you can start with for your written supervisory procedures. Most compliance software will have some sort of basis or template that you can use to start with your written supervisory procedures, okay? And that's quite honestly probably the best bet in terms of, just getting started with that document. Definitely not a document that I would say you want to write from scratch, okay? Doesn't sound like it'd be a whole lot of fun, and you're still just as likely to miss things as you would otherwise. Okay, so that's really the best way that I would say do it. Identify a good, strong template that you can use to start with. Read it, and then make sure that you comprehend the actual concepts within the document, and then remove or add any items that you deem necessary based on the size and shape of your firm, firm demographics, number of advisors that you have, type of technology tools that you use, things of that nature. Yeah, that's all.
I think I saw one other hand. Yeah.
I'll just give a testimonial. We've been working with Scott's firm for a number of years now. I know if you don't work with a compliance company, you know you don't want to spend the money, spend the money. 2 weeks after you signed up with Scott's company, we got the letter from the SEC.
Let's go.
I think Scott wanted to fire us. But seriously, like, I know it sucks to spend the money, do it, because having a firm like his, Stacie's interest is great too, do it, it's worth it.
Thank you, sir.
That's nice.
Thank you.
We have time for one more question.
I'll give a plug for Stacie. Years and her breadth and depth of knowledge in this industry is incredible. Anyway, but my question is, what do you see from the SEC about rec-fund programs?
That's a great question. If you currently offer a wrap program, you want to reevaluate that with your custodian. At this zero charge trading, is there really a need for your firm to have a wrap program anymore if you don't have any trading costs? So if you're still offering a wrap, you want to go back, you want to review that. And if you're solid on continuing in a wrap program, make sure it's all wrap or it's no wrap. Otherwise, you have to have an analysis on why they're in a wrap program, why they're paying a little bit higher price for your services without those trading fees.
Great. Well, thank you both. I know Scott and Stacie will be around for the rest of the event, so definitely connect with them. They can be a resource for you now or in the future with all the great feedback on working with them too. Thank you guys both.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.